Hey everyone, welcome to video 4. This is just a quick video covering those other audio effects that I was talking about in the beginning. So we talked about the EQ and the auto filter already. We did those exercises. So now we're actually going to look at the other ones I was speaking of, which was the saturator, overdrive, and the chorus. So I'm going to begin with the saturator here. So these are some really fun plugins to get some extra effects out of your sounds. Whereas the EQ and the auto filter are a little more technical. These are a bit more fun to play with. You can kind of just throw them on, mess around with the knobs until you get a sound that you like, and they can really change the character of a sound as well. So I've got 3 different tracks here. I'll just play these quickly. I've got some drums on the first one, little melody loop on the second one, and then just a vocal on the third. I'm going to demonstrate these effects on different types of sounds just so you can get an idea of what you can actually do with them. So we'll start with these drums up the top here. Now I'm just going to throw a saturator on. Okay, so what is a saturator? Essentially, a saturator adds drive and distortion and warmth to any track that you throw it on. So if you have a sound that's quite thin or lacking a bit and you need that extra punch, you can use something like the saturator to really bring out the dirt and the warmth in it. If you push it too hard, you can start to really distort the sound. So make sure you use it tastefully. Unless you are looking for a very distorted sound, then you can use a saturator and really crank this to destroy your sound, I guess. So I haven't done anything yet. Just got the saturator on, playing these drums. I'll just loop this. So over here we have the drive. This is going to be the main control that you'll use in the saturator. So at the moment it's not doing anything. So if I turn it on and off, there's no difference. Once I crank up this drive, it's going to start distorting. Oh, sorry, it's going to add warmth until I really crank it, and then it will slowly start to distort more and more. Cool. So I pushed it quite hard there, so you can see how the sound completely changed. Now this drive is going to be dictated by this curve. So what this curve is essentially how the input signal is going to be affected by the saturator. So you can change this curve down here. At the moment it's on analog clip. You can make it slightly harsher. So now you can see the curve changed. So if I crank this, you can see it's distorting much quicker. I'll go down a bit further, so medium curve, see how it's sharper again. Now it's going to distort even more. And then we can go to hard curve. Now it's a very sharp curve. I haven't even turned up the drive, and even with a hard curve, you can hear it already. So if you just want a bit of distortion, you could probably just throw it on hard curve. Leave the drive off and just throw a saturator on there with the dry wet up. There's a bunch of curves here that you can play around with. They all give you different effects. Got digital clip. And then wave shaper, which is usually the most, it can give you the most crazy kind of saturation. Not at the moment, but once you start pushing this curve up, you can really change this shape and get it much more drastic. But yeah, I usually use this quite sparingly, and I actually use it a lot more than I give it credit for. I mean, I throw it on a lot of my drums, or my synths, even vocals, because it just gives you a bit of that extra dirt and the extra saturation that you wouldn't get otherwise. So the main controls that you need to worry about in this are the drive. You can change those waveforms if you want. And then also you have your output here. I never really touched this, just to change your final volume. And then dry wet, we know what this is. So we have it on the saturator as well. Like I was saying, you're going to see it on a lot of plugins in Ableton. And then we have this soft clip here. This is essentially we haven't covered limiters yet, but it's essentially a really mild limiter just to prevent those sharp edges from creeping over. Down here, all these are mainly coloration controls. So we have it enabled. We have bass here. This affects how much the saturator will affect the low frequencies. You can see as I push it up there, those lows are really crunched. Then we have the frequency. Essentially, once you enable this, you get 2 extra filters that affect the saturator as well. So you can mess around with these. The depth, basically how much it will affect the saturator. I'll push the drive up a bit. And then the width is how much of the frequency range it's actually going to affect. So I don't really mess around with the colors too much. Sometimes, if you're really looking for a unique sound, then you can mess around with these. But the main things that you need to worry about are the drive and the dry wet, and then messing around with these curves. So let's try this on some different sounds. So we've heard it on the drums. Now with the drums, I pushed it quite hard, but to get something nice, even just something like that, just gives it a little bit of extra punch. So I'll turn it on and off. You're not quite distorting the crap out of it, but it's just enough to give it that bit of extra, that warmth. Okay, let's try this on the melody here. Okay, I've just switched out this loop real quick just so we can hear it a little bit better. So with cleaner sounds like this, it works very well. If there's a lot of noise and stuff in the background, it can distort quite quickly, which is why I changed the sample just there, because that other one had a bit of noise in the back. Whereas because this is much cleaner piano, we can really push this to get some warmth out of it without it distorting much. So you can see as I turn it on and off how the sound changes. Obviously you can really push this. We could try some of the other curves as well. This one's giving us quite a nice warm crackle without it being too distorted. See if we go down, now we're really distorting it. We try the wave shaper on here. Now this is what I was talking about when I was saying if you really wanted that full on distorted sound, you could definitely use the wave shaper for it and then crank up the curve here. And then you could use the EQ to kind of soften off the distortion so it's not harsh on the ears, and that way you can get a really nice distorted sound. This would be cool to try on something like guitar or a bass. Yeah, really just throw this on anything. You can experiment with some sounds. If it's too much, we can always use a dry wet. We get a bit of the original, or if you just want to add a subtle kind of distortion, we can put a harsh distortion in here, but actually just leave it on 10% or something like that. So there's many ways you can use this. I do recommend you just spend some time and throw it on some different sounds. If you have some sounds that sound weak, like they're very soft and you want to bring out, or they're too clean, and you want to bring out that warmth and that punch, this is an excellent way to do it. Just make sure you use it, sparingly. Don't crank up the drive or go too hard with these unless you're looking for that kind of effect. If you just want some warmth, you really have to tame this beast because it can get out of control. We'll try it on the vocal here. So even just something like that gives us a nice extra bit of punch from those vocals. So if you were using these in a drop of like a house track or something, let me just turn on this as well. Should work together. The vocals sound quite soft and weak on their own. I'm not just talking about volume as well. If I bring this down, bring this back up. So adds a nice little bit of crunch to those vocals, just to make them pop a little bit more. There, you can get some crazy effects with this. It's really fun to play around with. Yeah, it's definitely one of those tools that you're going to be using quite a bit, especially a lot of samples that you download. They're not going to be strong enough. Really depends on the type of music you make as well. But if you are into heavier music, you're going to be using the saturator quite a bit. Okay, we're going to look at the overdrive next. Go back to this drum loop. The overdrive is very similar to the saturator in that it adds drive and distortion. However, it's closer to something like a guitar amp or guitar pedal, and the sound kind of resembles that as well. So there's not very many controls on the overdrive, as you can see. It's quite small, but it is really powerful as well. So you can use this on anything again. Feel free to play around with it on any type of sound. But I'll just show you some of the effects here. So you can actually move this bandpass filter around by clicking and dragging this dot. If you drag it up and down, you increase the frequency range. If you drag it down, you decrease it. You can also move it up and down. So wherever you set this filter to, that's what it's going to affect the most. So as I bring it down here, you can hear the bass distorting. Let me just put this dry wet up to 100%. And then as I bring it up, I'm distorting the top end more, and I'm also filtering it out at the same time. So the drive here is very similar to the saturation. You can really crank this up. I find that you can go harder with the overdrive rather than the saturator without it distorting much. You get some really crazy, cool sounds. Now the tone is essentially like an EQ, so if you crank this up, you're going to hear more of the higher range. And see, as I bring it down, we hear more of the lower end. So you can play around with that. Obviously, I'm being quite harsh with this, so you can tame it down to get some nice subtle effects. You can bring this down as well, the dry wet. Dynamics here just affects the compression. I usually just leave that on 50% and then mess with all these other ones. So you can hear the sound's quite different when I turn this on and off. So you can use this for like an intro effect if you want. Let's say have it on for the intro where this drums sound like this. And as soon as you get into the track, you can turn it off and have the drums kick in. Let's try it on some other sounds here. So we'll just get rid of this saturator. We're on the overdrive. You can hear, even though I've cranked up the drive, it sounds a lot more pleasant than the saturator. The saturator is a much harsher distortion plugin, whereas the overdrive, you can really crank it and it still sounds decent. But they both have their uses. Likewise, we have the dry wet, so we can bring this down. So if I just have it down here, I'm adding a nice little fuzz to that piano. And you can crank this down as well. Now it's just a real subtle warmth. So you don't have to go too hard with it, you can also be subtle with it. Okay, let's try this on the vocal. Even just throwing that on and turning the drive down a touch, maybe the dry wet down a touch. Gives us that nice extra punch. If you wanted to go harder with it. Yeah, you can get a lot of different sounds just from using an overdrive. Messing around with the filter, with the drive, all these things. And it's nice because it's not overwhelming. There's only a few controls. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much the overdrive. Just wanted to show you how it sounds on a few different types of samples. It is a really powerful and small audio effect. It's very easy to use, so definitely have fun with it. Sort of just throw it on different types of sounds in your track, because it could bring out some sounds that you never knew were there, and it also gives a bit more uniqueness to your samples. Okay, the last one we're going to look at is the chorus. I'm going to throw this on. We'll start with the vocals, because it works really well on vocals. Probably one of the main things you want to use it on. If you are a guitarist, you probably already know what the chorus is. And this is essentially the exact same thing. So if I turn it off, I'll turn it on. You should be able to hear the difference there. It's definitely going to be more noticeable on stereo headphones. So if you're listening like from a single speaker, like a laptop speaker or something, it's not going to be as noticeable. So essentially what the chorus is doing is taking the input signal, so it's taking this sample, and it's adding two different delays on it that are working together in parallel, which thickens up the sound and gives us essentially what it's called is that chorus effect. So it's not just one voice. It sounds like there's multiple voices now, because it's ever so slightly delayed from left to right from the two delays, and then we're getting some pitch change as well. So as I move this around, we're getting a lot more modulation here. You can hear up here how crazy it is. But if you use it subtly, it can give us a really nice thickening effect to our sound. You can make it more drastic by moving this around and also by changing the separate delays as well. Let's try it on this piano as well. Get rid of this overdrive. Throw a chorus on. So you can hear it straight away with the piano. So yeah, chorus is excellent on vocals, pianos, guitars, instruments, basically all those synths. Not so much on drums really, because it's going to kind of make things a bit wishy-washy. So if I turn this on the piano, crank up the dry wet, really thickens up that piano now. Turn it off. So now it sounds like there's multiple pianos, like a chorus of pianos basically. So we can mess around with the feedback as well. See if I crank this. You can really hear the difference when it's on those settings, when the delays are really far apart. We can try it on the drums, but as I said, I wouldn't recommend it. Usually doesn't sound that great. Unless you use it on something like hi-hats or any of those upper frequency drums, as opposed to a kick or something like that. Definitely wouldn't use it on a kick, because you want the kick to kind of be centered and in time. You don't want it to be moving around left and right. Whereas those higher sounds, like the hi-hats and shakers, percussion, they can all be moving around, doesn't matter too much. Won't affect the rhythm of the track. Yeah, it's not too great on here. But yeah, vocals and this piano here works excellent. So the further you move this up, the more drastic it'll be. Essentially up and down is amount, and then left and right is the rate. I like to just move it around with the dot here. But more often than not, just throwing it on and leaving it is going to give you quite a nice effect. Same with the vocals. It's a nice subtle chorus, you can still hear it, but it's not over the top. But you can move it around to your taste. Well, that pretty much covers the 3 audio effects I want to show you for this video, on top of the EQ and auto filter that we've already learnt. So these are some really fun ones to use, and they can bring out a lot of extra character in your sounds as well. So start using them, play around with them, but like everything, you know, don't have to go over the top with them. Just use them on the sounds that they actually work on. You don't have to start throwing this on every track, especially with the saturate and overdrive, because if you do it too much and you overdo it, it can really destroy your track very quickly. So use these effects tastefully, but most of all, just have fun with them. So that's pretty much it for this video. We're going to come back in the next video, video 5, and we're going to start using all these things that we learned on our own tracks.